Friede is a run killer. She ranks among the hardest fights in Soulsborne, giving even the most experienced players a run for their money. Her 3-phase format is not only a test of skill, it's a test of endurance. As you might expect, her final phase is by far the most difficult. You're actually awarded a Titanite slab just for getting past phase 2, as if to say, you're gonna need this for your next attempt. Good luck, buddy. Indeed, the general consensus is that you'll want to be around soul level 75 to 100 before taking on Friede if you'd like to stand a fighting chance. So, what if I told you that it's possible to take her on as the second fight in the game, and win? For this task, we'll once again be choosing the Thief starting class. Since we'll only be getting our weapon to +5 before taking on Sister Friede, it's important to have the bleed status effect that our bandit knife inflicts, as this does damage based on a percentage of total health. Beyond that, all daggers in Dark Souls 3 have a great critical attack bonus. Since Friede tends to leave herself open to backstabs, this will greatly increase our DPS. I'll make a few detours along the way to pick up Titanite shards in early areas, but this is entirely optional. Since we'll ultimately be collecting the Dream Chaser's ashes, which allows you to purchase them infinitely, all we're really doing is saving money. When you get to Gundyr, make sure to start off by embarrassing him with a backwards parry, and then watch your bandit knife do its work with the innate bleed effect. You'll notice that, as with many fights in this game, staying close to Gundyr makes his moveset more predictable, and it completely trivializes phase 2. Once Gundyr is done for, you can use the souls to level a bit of vigor if you like, but make sure to grab at least one homeward bone. Later on, we'll focus exclusively on leveling vigor and dex in this run to optimize damage and survivability. Onward to Highwall. We'll carefully navigate through this spectacle of a starting area, making sure to avoid any engagements. After strafing the stab from this Lothric Knight, we'll grab the tower on the wall bonfire, and optionally, the Titanite shard in this corner. At this point of the video, you might begin to wonder what we're going to do about Vordt. After all, he's required, but if Friede's going to be the second boss, we aren't allowed to fight him. Fortunately, there's a pretty neat way around this. First, we'll need to grab the small Lothric banner from Emma and make our way down to the Vordt arena. All we need to do is trigger the boss fight for this next part to work, so we'll promptly homeward bone back out to the tower on the wall. From there, head down and enter this room. Make sure to dodge the arrow, and then roll through these tables into the corner. The Lothric Knight here will begin his pathing, but as long as you don't move, he won't detect you. Once he's passed, you can continue onward. But before we proceed, I'd like to explain something called a death cam skip. In every Souls game, most bottomless pits have a separate death cam trigger which lies above the actual kill plane. This means that, in some locations, it's possible to trigger the death cam without hitting the kill plane. This is particularly useful because assets do not load or unload while in death cam, which means certain obstacles, like locked doors or fog walls, won't ever load if you're far enough away when the death cam is triggered. Famously, this technique is used in Dark Souls speedruns as Sen's Gate Skip, and in Dark Souls 3 runs for Fahrenkeep Skip and Wilhelm Skip. And, though it's much less common, a death cam can also be used to skip Vordt. This particular technique was discovered by Peachy Mike, one of the most prominent glitch hunters in the Souls community. It operates exactly the same as Sen's Gate Skip, where performing a parry and riposte close to the edge of a wall pushes you slightly outside and into the death cam trigger. Once we've activated the death cam, we need to navigate back to the Vordt arena, but this is not necessarily an easy task. When in death cam, the game switches to tank controls, which can be extremely disorienting when you're used to traditional 3D movement. We do have a nice shortcut out of this room toward the area with the Winged Knight, but you'll see that I had a bit of a fiasco and nearly died in the process. Finally, after healing up and dropping down this ledge, we can somewhat blindly navigate to the doorway here, and from there things get easier since the terrain is visible but the enemies are not properly loaded. You'll notice that there is no fog wall preventing you from entering the arena, and in similar fashion, the door that would block you from exiting is not loaded either. Once we're standing near this message, we can quit out, and when we load back in, we've completely bypassed the arena. With the first major obstacle out of the way, we can proceed through the Undead Settlement, stopping for a few key items on the way. There's a couple of alluring skulls near these dogs which can be safely obtained if you don't get too close. You can use one of these skulls here to get past these 3 dogs, or you can just take your chances and quit out if necessary to grab this bonfire. Next, we'll grab the Estus Flask Shard and a couple additional Titanite shards on our way down to the dilapidated bridge. Most important, however, is the sharp gem that this crystal lizard drops. This will be necessary to have decent damage later on. After lighting this bonfire, we'll proceed forward and grab the undead bone shard to strengthen our Estus flask. Side note, if you have trouble with the giant's arrows in this section, you can choose the young white branch as your starting gift, and they won't damage you. Open the door and then drop down this ledge to easily access the cliff underside bonfire. There's another Titanite shard in this alcove if you like, and then you can drop down once the enemies on the bridge have moved along. I opted to run past the Hollow Manservants and quit out here to obtain a few additional alluring skulls. You can easily use one here to gain 3 more. Now, head down the elevator and run past the Outrider Knight to light the Road of Sacrifice's bonfire. Once it's lit, you can bait out this specific attack from him, which has a really long cooldown and will allow you to safely run past. Then, it's time to take the elevator back up and grab a few more choice items. In this room, pick up the alluring skulls and then use 2 of them to easily get past the dogs and evangelists. Then, pick up Flynn's ring, the Homeward Bones, and drop down for the Chloranthy ring. Since we won't be wearing armor at all, Flynn's provides a 15% damage boost due to our low equip load, and Chloranthy will significantly increase stamina regeneration. After the loot has been secured, bone back to Road of Sacrifices. You can grab another Titanite shard here, and then after lighting the Halfway Fortress bonfire, there are 2 more on the way to Crucifixion Woods. I took the time to grab an additional Estus Flask shard from behind this building, which is optional. Now, I forgot to do this until a little later, but you'll definitely want to get the Farron Coal in this area as it's necessary to infuse your bandit knife with the sharp gem. This is vital to increasing your damage output, as even with base stats, the bandit knife does more damage when it's sharp. Please note though that going to this area will trigger an invasion from Yellowfinger Hazel if you're embered, which is pretty annoying since you can't quit out or Homeward Bone when invaded. I opted to die to her, completely deliberately of course. Keeping Steam in offline mode will prevent this invasion altogether. Next, we'll need to brave the swamp. Farron Keep can be navigated much more safely in reverse, so immediately head this way upon entering. We can use the Bandit Knife's quick-step weapon art to navigate the swamp much quicker, but as you'll see, I had a hell of a time remembering how to two-hand my weapon after having played numerous hours of Elden Ring. Head up the stairs and then drop down behind this tree. As long as you wait for the Elder Groot to turn around before moving forward, he won't aggro. Pick up these extra Titanite shards on the way, then an undead bone shard in this slug-infested room, and you're ready to make your way up the beanstalk. We'll now grab the Dream Chaser's ashes and 2 large Titanite shards, which will enable you to level to +4. However, you can wait until later to level up because we won't have to fight anything until we make it to Friede's arena, and by then we'll have 4 more large Titanite and can level to +5. Speaking of which, one of those 4 can be obtained by performing Tree Skip and trading a regular Firebomb with Pickle P. There's also an Estus Flask Shard and the covetous Silver Serpent Ring up here if you want them. Next, the Matter of Sage. It's required that you defeat Sage before progressing to the Cleansing Chapel where Gale resides. There is a way to escape Sage's arena during the fight with some clever jumping, but I prefer not to engage Sage at all and instead walk through the area with impunity. The way that we'll accomplish this is by doing a precise jump known as Farron Keep Skip. Farron Keep Skip is usually used to bypass the locked door that leads to the Farron Keep perimeter bonfire, but in this case we're going to use it to bypass the Sage arena entirely. Warp back to Halfway Fortress, drop down around here, and kill the dogs below. Once they're dead, walk into this wall and then turn around so that your feet are vaguely in line with these 2 stones. Speedrunners will often line up their embered health bar with this leaf, but since we're currently unembered due to Yellowfinger Hazel, and also picked a different starting class, we'll line up the endurance bar with this little rock instead. Then, sprint forward and perform a 90-degree jump to the left using your keyboard. I like to rebind sprint to left alt and jump to right alt, but you can map the controls any way that works for you. With the goofy-ass camera angle and tank controls, this next part can be fairly difficult to navigate. Sometimes your character will autocorrect after bumping into a wall and you'll get sent off the ledge to your death, so I like to hug the left wall by intermittently tapping A as I walk forward until I'm past this section. We'll now backtrack past the Halfway Fortress bonfire and drop down toward the Crucifixion Woods area. Now, navigating the woods can be very confusing when in Deathcam, but it gets even worse when you enter this white void with almost no visual indicators of where you are. I wasn't having any success locating the staircase that leads to Sage blindly, so I decided to employ Magenius and leave a bloodstain as a marker for the door which leads to that room. After another successful execution of Fair and Keepskip, I located my bloodstain and carefully made my way up the staircase. Navigating towards the arena is still confusing in this section, but luckily it's a lot harder to mess up and drop down after you've gotten up the first set of stairs. Eventually, you'll see Sage's health bar appear and the screen will go dark, indicating that you're inside the boss arena. Since the camera angle can get flipped around a bit when you're in death cam, the exit of the arena isn't always easy to find, but you'll know you're out once your character starts to gain some height. Make sure to quit out before you've gone too far, or you might just fall off the edge. And there we are. Sage has been skipped without a single shot fired. Now, we'll blitz past this evangelist and grab the bonfire just in case. It would suck to have to do the entire death cam section again. Once you're past the section with the dogs, there's a super convenient Estus flask shard here before you enter the chapel. We can now grab the bonfire for safekeeping and talk to Gale to enter what is undoubtedly the most beautiful area in Dark Souls 3. The Painted World of Ariandel. Now, I promised we wouldn't be fighting anything until Friede, and I'll make good on that. Once entering the Painted World, head up behind these Farron followers. They won't give you any trouble. Once the ground falls from beneath you, a lot of wolves are going to give chase. You can use alluring skulls here, but I decided to take my chances and save the skulls for a harder part that's coming up. Dropping down through this hole usually confuses them anyway. After lighting the Rope Bridge Cave bonfire, drop down here and lock onto this crystal lizard while rotating behind to force him off the edge. This gives us one of the 3 remaining large Titanite shards that we'll need for +5. There's a couple more Farron followers to avoid, and somehow a wolf made it all the way down here as well, but not to worry. Believe it or not, you've probably done this part before. Having escaped from the city, it's time for a bit of speedrun tech to make this next part quicker. Jump at this rock formation and run slightly right and up before moving the analog stick up and jumping again. It may take a few tries to get it right, but it's a great time saver and avoids having to run past one of the utterly terrifying Corvian knights. You can light this bonfire if you wish, and then you'll want to take this parkour shortcut to avoid another vicious Corvian knight. After dropping down from this roof, past the gate mind you, we'll need to confront Sir Wilhelm. Again, I promised we wouldn't be fighting anyone on our way to Friede, and this is no exception. If you don't already have one, you can pick up a young white branch in front of this tree woman, then aggro Sir Wilhelm and quickly run out of the building. Position yourself approximately here and use the branch. It may take a few moments, but reliably, Mr. Wilhelm will blitz past you to his imminent demise. The next running section here is the scariest, but those alluring skulls we've saved will make it a lot nicer. Take the route that you see here. In the first part, you won't have to dodge much until you reach this Farron follower, who sometimes attacks. Roll if necessary, but keep moving. As you round this corner here, throw an alluring skull into the wall to attract the first 2 wolves. Ideally, don't get hit in the process. Continue the cycle of throwing a skull before you encounter each set of wolves, and you should make it through here without a problem. Then, take care to dodge any melee attack as well as the inevitable arrow from these Millwood Knights, and drop down to grab the last 2 large Titanite shards. At last, we've made it to relative safety. From here, it's an easy trek to the Ariandel Chapel bonfire. Light the bonfire and make sure to talk to Sister Friede until she gives you the Chillbite ring, which you'll want to equip immediately. This ring increases frost resistance and makes it much easier to stay topped off in Phase 2. Then, head back down the stairs into the cellar and pull this lever to open the boss arena. Make sure to immediately sprint away and use a homeward bone to avoid the flies. And that's it. We've reached Friede and opened the boss arena. All that remains is to level up, upgrade our weapon, and optimize our rings. I leveled up intermittently throughout this run and ended up with a +5 sharp bandit knife, 23 vigor, and 21 dexterity for the fight. My rings of choice were Life Ring, Chloranthy, Chillbite, and Flynn's. Even without any armor, we now have enough health to avoid being one-shot by most attacks, and the damage isn't half bad either. Now, all that remains is to challenge Sister Friede.
Please avert thine eyes. I will snuff out these ashes for good. Return from whence thou camest. Leave us be, Ashen One. Sweep all thought of us from thy mind, as thy kind always have.
Perhaps the greatest satisfaction in playing Dark Souls 3 is the feeling of overcoming insurmountable odds, and somehow the game never ceases to offer a challenge greater than the last. So the question again remains, what's next for us? Well, I have a few ideas.